host of Crypto Builders of New York City, a podcast shining a spotlight on crypto founders, builders, and visionaries right here in New York City, the crypto capital of the world. Today, I'm joined by Jay Kurahashi-Sofue, the CMO of Eco, which looks to connect the leading stablecoin ecosystems. Welcome, Jay.
Yeah, excited to be here.
So you grew up in Westchester, you spent time in Japan, and you went to university in the Midwest. So I'm curious, what aspects of these locations have shaped your personality into who you are today?
Both my parents are Japanese. My mom more or less grew up in the United States, but also lived in Japan as well. My dad came here when he was in his 20s. And so I had kind of a Japanese upbringing, but Westchester is, and especially the area that I grew up, was predominantly Jewish. So very Jewish American upbringing, I would say, more or less. Then kind of switched over to the Midwest, which is totally different, a little bit more conservative, I would say, if I were to kind of like summarize my experience there, and then came back to New York, and then throughout that whole time kind of was in Japan visiting my family, was in LA as well, and so got a little bit of different cities, and all of that is very different from my core, I think, at least, or like my ethnic background. And so I think different influences kind of shaped me in certain ways and also challenged me a lot, and I think that's ultimately why I ended up here, because I think this is where I'm most comfortable, but it was really nice to experience that, especially in my formative years.
I also think when you grow up in a bunch of different locations, it's hard for like any one place to feel like home because you take different aspects from it. So for you, like what aspects of how you are today do you think come from growing up in Westchester? What comes from spending time in the Midwest, and what's Japanese?
I'll start with the last point, actually. So I think where I'm Japanese is I grew up speaking Japanese at home until I was probably like in middle school.
Wow, that's actually such a blessing, because I feel like so many Asian Americans don't grow up speaking the language, and it's really hard to pick it up in adulthood.
Oh, it's really hard. Now, that's kind of where it stops, though. So it stops there. And my mom committed to English after that, which was super helpful just because we grew up here. And I had friends that kind of stuck it out more in Japanese, and I think they had a little bit more struggle with the English language versus my experience, I would say, like anecdotally at least. And then my dad, I grew up mostly with my mom, and my dad spoke predominantly Japanese at home. So that was where I got that education. Plus, I went to school on Saturdays.
Japanese school?
Yeah, Japanese school.
That's
with
awesome.
all these little Japanese kids. And so I think up until that point, I remember distinctly thinking in Japanese, doing things in Japanese in my head. And that being second nature. And then after that, because I grew up mostly with my mom after and lived with my mom, and my dad moved back to Japan, I was speaking English predominantly. So I feel like that gap I can sense, where when I go back to Japan, I was there a few weeks ago, I can speak casually, but if you want to like step it up, I have to like really study it more. So recently I've been studying it for the last year and a half, which has been super helpful.
That's
but
amazing.
Like still a slog. Like you just have to like keep doing it, right? Yeah.
It's so hard. I feel like going from 0 to 1 is like I think it's easy to like get kind of like really basic conversational, but to go from conversational to fully proficient is like 100 times harder.
To like really express yourself, like deep conversations. I can get there, but sometimes like I feel like I'm much better at it if I'm speaking with people who know English. Right. So I can do a little bit of like Japanglish type conversation.
And sometimes it sounds more, at least in Chinese, sometimes it sounds modern when you throw in like an English word. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And it makes you sound cool, because most Japanese people can't speak English.
Exactly. It's not that I don't know this word in Chinese.
I'm just more sophisticated.
I'm so cultured.
Right.
Do you feel like a different person when you're speaking in Japanese versus English?
Yeah, 100%. I'm much more conservative. I'm even less confident, I would say.
Because it's the cultural moray, not to be like so swaggering.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I think my jokes land better in English, but that's just because I can't say them right in Japanese probably. So I'll say something and like I'll get like blank stares, and I'm like, maybe that sarcasm didn't hit, because it just doesn't hit in that way.
So talk to me about living in New York City. So how long have you been in the city, and why do you choose to live in New York City versus, Westchester or maybe in LA where you have family?
So I moved here in 2014.
Okay. So you've been here a while.
Yeah, I've been here for a minute. Yeah. I lived in Manhattan for a few years and then moved straight to Williamsburg.
Yeah.
One of the things I say all the time is New York challenges me to go out of my comfort zone every day.
Right.
Like I could stick to the tech bubble or like the music bubble or wherever I'm most comfortable in, but I think naturally you almost can't do that unless you really try.
Yeah.
Because you walk outside and it's not necessarily the case that your colleagues live all around you, right?
Right.
And the neighborhood is all, I mean, Williamsburg is just a little bit homogenous these days. But aside from that, like, I think there is still socioeconomic diversity. You can be in, like, you know, a billionaire could be next to you, and then there's someone who's completely the opposite side.
Right.
And even the last apartment I lived in Williamsburg, I was in a Latin American kind of neighborhood.
Oh, that's super cool.
And it was really cool.
Yeah.
And it was humbling. It was eye-opening. I learned so much. I met a lot of really cool people. I don't think, if I hadn't lived there, I probably wouldn't have integrated as deeply, even though I was only there for a few years. But
right.
That was like one quick example of why I think it really like challenges you to go out of your comfort zone all the time.
100%. That's what I love about living in New York City. You know, you get to rub shoulders with people that you might never interact with, you know, if you just stay in your hometown.
Yeah.
So talk to me about what it's like to be in the stablecoin space and to work in New York City, and what the things that you like about the crypto scene in New York City.
It's just so high energy, and everybody that's showing up every day is trying to be the best at what they do.
Right.
You either are the best or close to the best, or you are trying to get there. And so that energy is like quite infectious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I feed off of that very well.
Right.
And so even when I was at my early kind of post-college job,
Mm-hmm.
I remember I would be like, oh, well, this is what it's like to work in Midtown. I got to wake up at like 5 in the morning, go to the gym at 6. And I saw everybody else doing it with me. And then you stay at the office till even sometimes midnight, you leave, and there's plenty of people doing that, not only in your building, but everywhere else. And then the subways are still packed, and on and on and on, right?
Totally.
And so that's like the macro. But when you go into crypto, this is a more of a newfound opinion. I think for a very long time, especially like from 2015 to probably like before COVID, it wasn't that cool to work in crypto. I think it's still now maybe not that cool, but it definitely wasn't cool back then. Like I remember I would like self-censor almost. When people go, what do you do? I would be like, oh, I work in tech.
Right, or fintech if you're like getting a little closer.
I don't want to get into it, so I just like leave it at that.
Right.
Now I feel a little bit more sense of pride because I don't have to explain things as much. And even the word stablecoins, like I can say that.
Oh, totally.
And people are like, oh, wow, really?
Exactly.
And like, I guess that's a little bit of vanity to some extent, so I feel good about myself. But I think the other real answer is there's so much talent here. It's really exploded since COVID, but also before that. I know Consensus was a big contributor to the rush of talent that came to New York, or that just kind of sprouted out of the different industries that kind of crossed over. I think there's plenty of other companies, like Blockworks is another great example. Huge respect for Jason, good friend. And I think all of these companies are doing different things in the space and just attracting more and more. And so the pie keeps growing. And I think recently I saw on Twitter, someone posted, I'm sure many people posted recently, but they were saying, okay, New York is the crypto capital of the world, or even America. I remember saying this, I think, before COVID, and there were so many people arguing, like Miami, SF. Like, and I'm sure they have strong contingencies, but it's now interesting how the tide has shifted a little bit.
Totally.
Plus the regulation that had kind of made New York a little bit scary to operate in, like the BIT license back in the day. I feel like that's kind of a figment of the past more so, especially for newcomers. They just don't even know what that is really. And so I think the regulatory kind of clarity too helps to just motivate people more to come to the city.
For sure. So, you know, right now we live in a city where there's a positive regulatory environment, but that changes potentially every 4 years. So what do you think that means in terms of New York City's status as the crypto capital of the world?
I think generally there's a lot of good that's happening, a lot of very influential people now that are actually pushing for this type of environment. I also know, more anecdotally, back, I think before COVID, the city was actually providing a lot of subsidies for fintech and then also therefore crypto companies to set up offices, use co-working spaces. There's a Bushwick generator. I don't know if they still do this, but back then it was they were one of the co-working spaces that was actually benefiting from that, and they were attracting a lot of companies to come to that location. And so I think, you know, as much as there might be strict policies that come up depending on who's in power because of their worldview, I suppose, I think the cat's out of the bag a little bit, and everybody else is already kind of tilling away at trying to make a great foundation for these companies, not just crypto, just anything disruptive, I would say. And so I feel like it's hard to really push that back in.
For sure. I totally agree. I also think that before, when people thought about crypto, they thought about scams and ICOs. And now when you think about stable coins, like banks use them.
Right.
You know, so it's a different level of legitimacy.
Yeah.
So speaking of stable coins, there's so much hype. It's been such a banner year for stable coins. So obviously very exciting time to work in the industry. So in your own words, can you distill what you think is happening? What is the opportunity? What's the gap? And what's ECO's role in all of this?
I think what's happening is the story is becoming clearer, but that doesn't necessarily mean like mega bullish stablecoins, unfortunately. Like I am very bullish on stablecoins for the record, but in any hype cycle, I think you do have a narrative that tends to lead before the substance catches up.
Right.
So I think there's kind of like this strange lag effect. And that happens with every cycle, right? Like DeFi said, hey, we're going to create this finance with no intermediaries. Well, that's taken a fair amount of time, and it's definitely caught up since 2017, but certainly still has a way to go, right? Same thing with NFTs. Like, I believe in the technology. I'm not entirely sure how it's going to manifest in the future, but that first cycle that we saw right around COVID, it kind of dipped, and now we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen there. And so there's these narratives that really kind of outpace the technology. I think stablecoin is the same thing, though I do think that it is an easier story to consume and really take action against, right? Like NFTs, you come in and all these corporations are like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We're just going to make collectibles. I think that was like what they figured out. And unfortunately, if you saturate the market with a bunch of collectibles, that probably doesn't work. With stablecoins, it's probably like tied most simply to the dollar, and that is very familiar to most people. And so the use case is much more obvious. And to act on that, I think, is a much clearer path, is my guess. Now, I think what that means for ECO is, well, we've been working on this for years. We've been focusing on this. I think we're not the only team to be focusing on this. I think a lot of people in the industry have identified this as this category as a very promising category for the space and just in helping the world generally. And so we as a team, I think if I were to kind of simplify into one kind of problem statement that we were focusing on, or at least understanding, is how we got there was we all are extremely passionate about this space. We're extremely passionate about this space. We're, I would say, probably top percentile users. And so we know exactly what the pain points are because we deal with them every single day, have dealt with them for 5, 10 plus years at this point. And so when you understand these problems, then you start to much more clearly understand what solutions might be needed before the masses kind of take hold of that. And so what we're focused on is we're focused on trying to make sure that stablecoins can move as quickly as possible wherever it's needed from a demand perspective. So that's like a general headline. But the first kind of phase of the company has really been focusing on a multi-chain effort, trying to just streamline the fragmentation that exists within the blockchain space. There are so many different blockchains. There are so many different stablecoin asset types. I looked at it briefly before I came here, actually. The top 10 chains in terms of stablecoin volume, or top 11, I believe, have over $1 billion in TVL. And if you think about it, that's only 10 in the early innings of crypto. And so if for a regular user, you now have to figure out what's the difference between USDC across all of those different chains. And it shouldn't be there shouldn't be a difference, but to the untrained eye, it might look different, right? And so I think that's where we want to come in and streamline that experience and not have people worry about that. And ultimately, everyone talks about this infrastructure probably getting pushed away and kind of abstracting it away. And so I think the simpler the infrastructure, the simpler the user experience on top will be.
That is actually such a good point. So when I transfer, crypto to myself in Coinbase, it's really interesting because if I'm transferring USDC, it'll be like, oh, make sure if you're doing USDC Ethereum that you're selecting kind of like the right option. And I was like, well, obviously that makes sense to me, but that would be really difficult to explain to someone who's not super crypto native, right?
Exactly.
That's a horrible user experience. So speaking of which, What exactly does ECO do to be able to smooth out this fragmented stablecoin landscape?
In this phase right now, so we have a product called Routes. Routes is simply just pathways between chains. And so right now, I forget the exact amount, but we have a dozen plus, maybe even almost 20 chains that are connected. And so we're just the protocol that enables that swift movement of stablecoins. What you need are applications to integrate or services to integrate eco in order for the regular user to experience eco, so to speak. Like you would need a front end. So one example would be a bridging solution. If you wanted to send stablecoins over to a chain that you were trying to use an application on, you could do that very quickly and cheaply, basically instantly and very low cost. And so in the back end, there are basically solvers, and we use an intense protocol, framework. I won't get into the technical components of that, but effectively you have a network of market makers who are there at the ready to service the demand that exists from either side. Longer term, we can actually make this much more complex. We can actually integrate this into applications like decentralized finance applications, things that require very fast stablecoin movements, so then they can actually fulfill the need for the customer on the other side. So if it's like a lending protocol, you can't have a delay in between, because sometimes there's pricing issues. Then there might be, I guess more broadly, Oracle issues, whatever data feeds they're inspecting. And so you do really need that real-time stablecoin execution. And I think that's similar to traditional finance, right? Like traditional finance, imagine if you have a Forex trader who's trying to trade a certain currency, and they have to wait a certain amount of time before that executes. It just wouldn't work.
Oh, no, that would just be laughable.
Yeah, exactly. So,
right?
and HFT kind of made it totally extreme, where it's just so
it's
fast.
The other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. So I think blockchains will probably get there at a certain point. And so we're just trying to account for that inevitability, I suppose, where everyone's going to always keep demanding speed, performance, low cost, typically. Those are kind of the three, and reliability, I would say.
So speaking of demand for stablecoins, I think you're a good person to ask this because maybe you see more of like a bird's eye view of the landscape. So, I think people are familiar with the use case of stablecoins in places like Argentina, where there's rampant inflation of the currency. Can you talk through some stablecoin use cases in the United States where we already have easy access to the US dollar?
I think this is like the most interesting topic that often gets totally misrepresented by people like me, actually, and maybe people like us. We live in the United States. We don't really understand what it's like to be unbanked. We don't really understand what it's like to have to do remittances. Like I certainly don't. I don't deal with remittances with my Japanese family members, for example. But I have spoken with a decent amount of people, and I've actually learned some incredible kind of use cases that I never even knew existed before. But generally with the US, I think actually one personal example is more like, it's not the best example, I think, but I think it's a decent one because it's just so low key. One example is we're becoming increasingly more global, and that's just because of the internet. Other countries are coming online, and the talent pool is only expanding. And so to hire a website developer or a graphic designer or whatever you need that typically doesn't need to be in the office and doesn't necessarily have to be American, right? You can actually go offshore for that. So for Totally Separate Project, we've been working with a music label that I was as a side project. And with this project, was trying to build a website just with as little cost as possible. Found a team in Indonesia. They actually had two payment options. One was credit cards and just general wire transfers, I think, or maybe not credit cards, but debit cards and wire. And then the other one was USDT on Tron. And so one of the biggest pain points actually was to get my asset to Tron, because I don't have any
I don't think I've ever used Tron.
Yeah. So I remember I was like, oh yeah, I work in crypto. I can do this. I'll just pay in stables. This is totally cool. But then kind of the punchline of eco comes into play, where a lot of my balances are on other chains. And so I was trying to figure out how to get over to Tether on Tron. And this was like a year ago. So now I think there's a lot of solutions, including eco, that can do that. But that was something that was an interesting use case. And guess what happens? I have to imagine they don't have to pay the fee for settling or withdrawing from their bank or whatever they use on the other side, I didn't have to also pay the fee either. It was like cents on the dollar, if anything, and they got it immediately. And so I think it's just a better payment system first and foremost. And I think that's been understated because I think we've been digging, kind of what I was alluding to before, we've been digging for that like holy grail use case. And oftentimes I think it's the most mundane stuff that actually needs that help. And if you actually multiply that by the world's population, it can actually be a profound impact.
I think that's a really good point. So it reminded me of something. When I used to live in Germany, I was earning euros, but my main bank account was in the US. So to have to convert it to like US dollars and then send it back. And so I'd lose money both on the conversion as well as sending it back. And I was like, it's crazy how big of a chunk that companies can take, just for sending your money from one country to another. And it's actually not smooth and it's not intuitive. And bank accounts get frozen all the time for suspicious transfers.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I think, in tech, we love chasing like the new sexy narrative, but oftentimes it's things that are maybe more boring or they sound more mundane. That's actually like an enormous use case.
Yeah. And I think the other one is more like on the financial side, but I've been using stablecoins for DeFi since like the early version of DAI, so that must have been like the ICO phase. Yeah, try my best out there. Wins and losses all over the board. But at this point now I'm running a lot of like, it's not purely cash, I suppose, but in my kind of risk kind of curve, I suppose, I kind of treat it more like cash to some degree, and I can earn better yields on them just because you're early. I don't think it's necessarily going to last in that kind of like high yield mode forever, but for now, I think a lot of people can get rewarded for simply being early as long as you obviously know the risks and everything, and there are certainly risks. But I also see that like my friend who's not in crypto actually called me the other day, and he was like, it might have been the political climate and everything else, but he was saying, I'm a little bit worried about the politics and stuff, and I've actually focused a lot more of my energy on finance, which I didn't really do before. Like, are there areas where I can earn yield on stablecoins? I find that to be interesting. And I think this was more of like a trigger finger kind of feeling a little bit, and I have to like sit him down and be like, okay, here's exactly all the things you need to know, here are the risks and whatnot. But even just that question would have never happened from this particular friend like 5-10 years ago. And even some of my banking friends are looking at me and saying, hey, do you know about this tokenization stuff? It's really cool. And I'm like, I know, I've been talking about it for like,
You're like,
forever.
I've been telling you about this.
Yeah. And I think unfortunately, like I said about kind of this moment, the story wasn't clear. As a marketer, I find that to be really important. And even 10 years ago, if you asked me how to describe blockchain, I could not tell that story that well, because it was like, you'd start, this is more of a joke, but I would start with like, Satoshi Nakamoto, then you have to like the hashing mechanisms.
There's so much lore. There's
like
so
lore that
much
no
background
one cares
information.
about.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like Byzantine generals.
And I've watched so many YouTube videos to understand exactly how to tell that story, but no one cares. And it's really people, 99% of the world want the spark notes. And we work in it, and I think it's good to know the lore just so you can tell that better story. And I think that's what we've grown up as an industry to become, is we're able to collectively tell a better story.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of marketing, can you talk about what marketing efforts look like in the stablecoin space today versus, the other crypto verticals that you've worked in previously? Just because it's such an exciting time, and I think there's more, understanding from the general public on what stablecoins are.
Yeah. I might get roasted for this, but I feel like it's a little bit more serious, maybe by a little bit.
I mean, I think that's totally fair, because a lot of there's institutions and fintech companies.
It's like there's serious people at the table. You don't want to scare them away with like your meme nonsense or whatever.
And your milady PFP.
Yeah, which I think they're all cool and stuff, but it's like you're going to only trigger more questions than answers for the uninitiated. Right. And then you're just going to totally detract. So I think that's like that's kind of like the underpinning of it. But I think also, I guess related to that maybe, is all these vendors and all these platforms are not really treating it like the kind of casino scam category that crypto got batched into for the last X amount of years, like forever now.
Right.
And so even as much as we are taking it more seriously, I think as operators within these teams, I think also we're being taken more seriously in reverse. Like Google, I remember when I was at DEX, AirSwap, I think Google, all the social media platforms, including Google, had banned crypto outright completely. It didn't matter what you did. It didn't matter like if you were serious. And then they kind of backtracked and they said you have to have these licenses because they didn't really know how the world worked. And then they didn't realize that the only people that hold those licenses are exchanges.
Right.
And so that X's out everybody else.
Yeah.
And then eventually they kind of just stopped caring, I think. And then now I think it's a little bit more lax. So I think the playing field is kind of more back to parity to a traditional company. I don't mean to say that the strategies are the same. I think they're very, very different. But I think now people can actually access things that they couldn't access before and properly do marketing, whereas before they'd have to get a little bit creative. Like, how do we actually run Twitter ads without actually having an account through the official means? And those are some things that I know myself and my colleagues would have to work through. And there were solutions, but they were super janky.
Right. I think marketing crypto is also such an interesting it's such an interesting field too, because we use crypto as this blanket term for the whole space, but it's actually very varied. It's almost as varied as like tech, right?
Yeah.
Because marketing is all about like who your target audience is, and who the target audience is for like a really like crypto native DeFi app versus an exchange versus like Robinhood crypto versus what you guys do. That's all super different. So walk me through kind of the channels that you guys use for marketing and how you segment your intended audience.
I think the biggest difference actually doesn't come from like the resources that you have in front of you, like the channels or everything. Like I said before, it's more or less at parity at this point. I think the difference is really because this category is so convoluted and changing all the time. And to your point, it's so big that I think everybody generalizes, well, I'm going to create a customer persona, and it's going to be the crypto native persona, which I've heard a million times. Now, that persona is vastly different if you're in the NFT category versus the meme category versus the exchanges category and stablecoin and so on. And so to even batch that into one kind of major generalized bucket is just doing your strategy a disservice, and I think also doing the segments a disservice because they're not the same. And I think they might have been the same 10 years ago because there was like 10 people in the industry. But at this point, we have plenty more than that. And so with eco, I would say the foundation is pretty general, or pretty common, where we're focusing on digital marketing channels. Why? Because we're a startup, and also because our customers are most likely there. So social media, content, online podcasts and interviews, PR, and maybe like miscellaneous is like search and whatever else kind of like attaching to it. So we're trying to be present in all of those channels and make sure that our narrative is perpetuating as clearly as possible, so whoever's receiving that understands the story like we've been talking about. If they don't understand that story, then the marketing is not working. And I think people overemphasize Twitter, is my criticism to kind of like the general masses. I think Twitter is a very important channel, but I don't think it's the only one. And so I think the second piece I always talk about is playing the arenas that no one else is playing, or there are very few competition. Because everybody's distracted with even the channels that I named before, you actually have a better chance at success if you try areas that may be weird or maybe just totally unorthodox to this kind of general batch. And a few examples that we've tried, and so one channel we've tried in is GIFs. We're not the first crypto company to try GIFs by any means, but we filled a gap that really accelerated our growth there, and it was more on the awareness side. So we publish all of our GIFs on Giphy and Tenor, two of the biggest GIF platforms that exist in the world.
Wait, what GIFs do you guys have? I was unaware of this.
So we've produced like 1,000+ GIFs, I think. They're an incredible amount.
That's incredible throughput.
Yeah. Shout out to John and his kind of like contractor group, but huge throughput, and we did this in like a month. The bet was we have to do this as quickly as possible because we don't have much of a moat, admittedly. And so if we do this, we can actually plant our feet in, and hopefully we'll just outpace everybody else in the algorithm, kind of like how search works, because Giphy and Tenor also work in a search model.
Right.
We identified all these different adjacent companies, stablecoin companies, chains, kind of miscellaneous that are related to eco, so just kind of very upper funnel. good example is Monad. So Monad, we don't actually have them integrated, but we could potentially integrate them. They are a chain that actually has a ton of gifts, but for some reason, the community that was actually publishing gifts on these platforms were not doing it in like a concerted technical way, tagging appropriately, just focusing on search intent. So all we did was create these kind of low-hanging gifts that were just pretty commonplace, I would say. You've seen them everywhere, and some like net new ideas. And then just tag them appropriately, worked with the brand team at Giphy. So we have a formal brand account that boosts our visibility by default. So no one knows that. I learned that by doing this, actually, which is really cool. And then so we did this in like April, May-ish. In the first 2-3 months, we got like 60 million views.
Wait, that's crazy. Wait, so what's the content of the gifts themselves?
They're like very like leaning into, depending on what the use case is. So if they're kind of like bullishness, because that's like the main emotion that Twitter and sometimes LinkedIn, but not so much LinkedIn, kind of exude online. And so anything that makes people really proud about whatever brand they want to support. So it's like a Monad token logo, and it's like the rocket shooting up in the sky or something.
I see. So you're supporting kind of a lot of these brands in your general ecosystem.
That's like the first kind of tier, and then every single GIF has our logo on it.
Oh, I see. I was gonna ask if you guys had a mascot or something, or what are you creating a GIF of?
Every single one has our logo on it. It's pretty boldly placed.
Wait, that's so funny.
And it's hosted on our brand account. So there's attribution directly back to our Giphy and Tenor pages.
Okay.
And so we can actually capture, we don't capture leads actually, but we can capture attention that way.
Right.
And then it just is a flywheel, because the algorithm goes, oh, well, this eco account creates great GIFs. We'll just keep serving the next GIFs up. And so we actually pushed a brand campaign to introduce called Unleash the Stables, which is like more horse themed, and this idea that eco literally unleashed the stablecoins basically. And we had branded kind of gifts there. And I would say that if we started with the branded gifts first, we wouldn't have found the success and eyeballs that went towards the branded gifts than if we did the Monad and kind of like the more low-hanging stuff that we knew would win. Because at this point now, the platform knows that we're a strong account, and so anything that we produce usually like ranks to the top fold at least, and it's up to the content for it to stay there, I suppose.
Right.
But like if you search, Ether or ETH even, all like a handful of the Ethereum gifts are ours. And so we're just ranking on every single piece, and even the stablecoins, so like Tether, USDC, all of those, they're everywhere.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
So have you gotten people who have come up to you and been like, oh, I like discovered your brand through the gifts?
So one kind of anecdote that we've seen through the social team so many times, which is really cool, is we don't do as much now because we kind of tone it down on volume on the Twitter side. But if we see like a bullish piece of news that was, let's say, like Tether adds mints more USDT, then we just reply to that news article as quickly as possible with the Tether GIF. And then every one of the Tether people will see it, and then usually they'll upvote it, and it usually will be like second in ranking next to the reply. Now, this is the coolest part that we discovered once running this strategy. Then like obviously founders, obviously C-suite, I know like Sandeep from Polygon has kind of fallen into this, I don't want to call it trap, but kind of this like strategy many times where he'll retweet the Polygon GIF or like post it. Once you do that, all of the eco content now gets pushed up to the front no matter what you do. And so what we do immediately after that is push really strong content related to Polygon. Because now we don't get lost in the algorithm, because the algorithm won't
knows how to funnel
exactly.
Yeah,
we will never be shown probably if he didn't engage with us.
Exactly.
So now we hook, and then once that hook comes in, then we deploy the serious post or the call to action that's a little bit more bottom funnel or mid funnel, and then we've gotten so many followers from incredible people because of this. And I think the biggest challenge is how to make sure to convey the eco story, but I suppose that's what you do when you're leading someone down the funnel. So I think they're kind of in the middle stages, because often they're like, oh yeah, we know you, but we don't really know what you do. And so I think that's just part of the rest of the efforts that we're trying to accomplish to try and hopefully convert them if they're relevant.
I see. So would you say that your marketing efforts focus on different parts of the funnel, or are there parts of the funnel that are more of an emphasis, like brand awareness?
We focused mostly on bottom middle. I feel like I tend to find that easier in the beginning, especially if we're starting out the gate. But now we have the full funnel. We have a very robust full funnel. I think the last component that's really that we're waiting on effectively is once the product deploys fully on mainnet, then we'll focus on conversion and whatever that ends up being defined as. But we're like humming at all sides of the funnel, which is great.
Yeah.
And some areas, some months or some quarters will have a down round, and that's
Right.
when we have to diagnose, okay, well, this channel that sits in the middle, why isn't it doing so well?
Right.
And we'll figure out how to tinker with that and try different ideas. But ultimately now we've been running, I've been at Eco for a year and a half almost. I would say we finally got everything stood up, at least like the core capability, by Q1 of this year, and then really started to tack on some of the extracurricular channels effectively that are important but just weren't foundational at the Q1 stage. And that took like most of the Q2 and almost Q3 to get that completely up, and then just validate some of the ideas that we had, just so we have like a really nice V2 marketing stack.
That's really interesting. Okay, so how would you define the goals in terms of the middle and bottom of the funnel? So top is just general awareness. Is the middle like partner acquisition, or how do you think that through?
I think upper is general awareness, but also education on the category, like the broader category of
Right.
stablecoins, I would say.
Right.
We want to be seen as thought leaders and experts within the space. So before they even get to the middle, we want them to know, hey, like we are serious and we are
Yeah.
actually at the forefront of what we're doing.
Right. To understand the lay of the land,
Yeah.
not just know what your brand is.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think that's like a really important part. And then I think the second stack in kind of the consideration set, I would say probably really about a little bit more of like the value propositions that are strong towards the product, like high performance, opinionation towards the stablecoin category. We're not like taking all the coins and tokens that are out there. We're really sticking to one category.
Right.
So we're associated in the right way.
Right.
I think there are also, as you go a little bit farther down in the consideration set, there's probably a little bit of how do you actually compare and size up against your competitors. I think the competitors aren't as clearly defined because I think the space is so new, and the interop space is also relatively new, at least in terms of live products. But we still do have a concerted effort to try to educate people within that stack. And then at the bottom, it's really more probably like overemphasizing on developer conversion, though we haven't really started the community building side yet. We're kind of waiting on that, just honestly bandwidth, if no other reason on itself. And that's really where likely we'll probably align it to product goals. Like what does a conversion mean? What are the customer acquisition costs, lifetime value, all the traditional metrics.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. So, talk me through your ecosystem at Eco. Like, what partners do you need at launch to be successful? What other types of like collaborations or partnerships do you need at the point of launch?
So what I'll give context on is this year we've been focusing predominantly on product validation. We actually have a component of the protocol on mainnet. So what's been interesting with that model actually is or the two companies, Avalanche and Airswap, that I've been, I don't recall doing a straight to mainnet approach actually to some degree. But what's been interesting about that is I think testnet is like kind of a controlled environment, and so it doesn't feel really real, right? And so the insights feel off sometimes, and you might not even get insights at all. It's
like trading in like a fake stock market versus like how you know how people trade. It's like I don't think the insights like transfer over.
No, and there's also like false flags and all that stuff. So since Q1, we've just been focusing on validating that routes product, which is, as a reminder, it was more just connecting the chains together and making sure that stable coins flow as quickly as possible within these chains. So that's been helpful to then really understand how we can actually provide more resilience to the protocol from the engineering and product side. So these aren't really customers, they're kind of part of the offering, but I'll just call it customers for the sake of the conversation. The biggest customers we've been focusing on for most of the year is actually the chains and the assets themselves. Because in order for the protocol to work, we need those components to exist.
Right.
So we've deployed a bunch of chains, a bunch of assets, and that was really up until like this quarter actually. Recently, I think a month or so ago, now I can't remember when it was, but LeFi was one of our first major customers. LeFi does a bunch of things, but one of the things they do is they route liquidity across a lot of different applications, and they're known for doing that for a lot of DeFi.
Right.
One of the problem statements they came through with was some of the routes that they have aren't as performant as they would like, and so they need a better solution. And it just so happens that ours was faster and cheaper and more reliable. And so we're actually integrated into LeFi, facilitating certain routes to make sure that those are actually working the way they need it to be. And so to answer your question from just earlier on what type of customers I think we need in launch, I think we need more of those types of customers. I think we also are trying to validate different categories, but I think that's more like the liquidity infrastructure kind of loose category. I think there's also like an applications category as well that's a little bit farther out. There's probably many more, but the idea is obviously kind of startup 101. We want to validate our direction as best as possible while also taking in that feedback, most importantly on the engineering and product side, but also on our side, which is like marketing and go to market.
I see. And when is mainnet launch for you guys?
TBD on that
soon
side.
TM.
Yeah, it's the soon TM, but I've learned not to say anything at this point.
Don't jinx it.
Yeah, don't jinx it, but I think it's in due time. I'm pretty bullish on a lot of the kind of, I don't want to like be super hyperbolic. I was about to say breakthroughs, but certain findings that we've had internally, and even just some like hypotheses that have been validated or invalidated. And so that's been super exciting because now we can actually proceed much more confidently in the directions that we want to proceed in. And I think what's been really cool is LeFi was one of them, but other people are now recognizing that. Conversations are sprouting up more organically rather than us being the ones to go out and just focus on outbound for the most part for like the last year or so, right? And so we feel this kind of inevitability that's kind of coming to place, but I don't want to jinx it either. So that's kind of, it's kind of reminiscent of some of those feelings I've had at Avalanche before we kind of got bigger, and even at AirSwap before we got bigger there as well. Like, that's really why I love startups. It's like you're kind of at the edge of your seat all the time.
Right. There's a lot of potential energy.
Yeah. The breakthroughs are really when it's like the best feeling, and that doesn't actually happen that often.
Yeah.
But I think that hunger and that journey and that fight for that breakthrough is really what I certainly chase, and I think a lot of my peers who really like startup environments chase.
Yeah, I love working with a small team with this like really singularly focused vision, and when you guys achieve it, it's just like, it really is like the best feeling. So what's your call to action for the listeners of the show? Can they check out Eco, or can they play around on testnet? Yeah,
so I would say probably I'll break it into two. One, easy call to action. We have the best brand in the world. The reason why I say this is because it's ECO, very easy. And it's ECO.com. So check out eco.com. We have the Eco Twitter. We have a lot of the vanilla Ecos, like no numbers or anything, which is like such a nerdy flex, but it is a good flex as a marketer, I think. So just go there if you want to learn a little bit more about that. I think that's a really good step one. But I think step two is if you're actually interested in using the applications, or rather like seeing how the protocol works, we have a front-end application called the Portal, and it's the Eco Portal, which is portal.eco.com. And this is where you can just see how the stablecoins get transferred across chains. I would say kind of like a point one of that is because LeFi is live, and I think we have a few others. You can probably check on Twitter or something, but there are other applications that finally recently integrated us. You can actually just use it through mostly bridges for now, but longer term, you'll hopefully see other types of applications.
So thank you, Jay. I'd like to close things out with some lightning round questions. Okay, so what are 3 things in Westchester that you think are superior to New York City?
By the way, I know you sent this to me before, but I did not prep any answers.
Oh, that's
this
good.
is purely lightning.
Okay, this is off the dome. It's off the dome. It's organic. It's real.
Okay, 3 things that are better. Okay, there's more space, so there's much more greenery.
True.
That's number 1.
Yeah.
I think number 2 is,
any food that's better in Westchester?
No, the New York food scene's so good. Like that's like really hard to say. I think number 2 is a little bit related to space, but I think a little bit separate. Is I think there's a little bit of a different kind of different cultural institutions. Like there's a lot of different museums. There's also a lot of different like kind of weird stuff in these like Hudson Valley.
Oh, really? What museums would you recommend, like around where you're from?
I mean, I feel like just like an hour or 30 minutes north from me, it was like Storm King and like Beacon. Yeah, Dia. But I think like one in my hometown, like the Rye area, is near SUNY Purchase actually. There's PepsiCo their headquarters has an amazing museum, and it's actually open to the public.
Wait, oh wow, that is a deep cut.
Deep cut. It's on Purchase Street. I used to go bike there all the time as a kid, but PepsiCo has a really cool kind of like Storm King-esque
Are you serious?
garden. Yeah, it's really cool.
Wait, can you name a fun Pepsi fact that people wouldn't know? Not to put you on the spot.
I only knew I had friends' parents who worked there, but
Yeah.
other than that, like I wasn't into soda, so I have terrible Pepsi facts.
Oh, yeah,
actually,
no,
I
actually, I
know
don't
one
like soda
Pepsi
either.
fact.
Oh, yeah.
Only because I watched a documentary. There was some guy that did that that airplane thing,
The one with like
the fighter jet.
You mean that Twitter meme with like the spots that are weak on an airplane? Do you know what I'm
No,
talking
no,
about?
no.
Oh,
No.
I know you're talking about like the Lean Cuisine thing where they like had a points
Yes,
system. Yeah.
yes. So this guy, I guess Pepsi tried to run a marketing campaign, and they said if you they arbitrarily picked like if you collect like 1 billion bottle caps or something, it wasn't a billion, but it was some reasonable number.
Some like crazy
number, you'll get a fighter jet, and that was like the promo. And some guy did the math, and they were like, if I can actually operationalize this and invest like
you'd be in the green.
Yeah. So he
Yeah.
did it, and he never got it actually, and I think
Did you sue them?
Yeah, I think so. There's like a documentary about the lawsuit and
Oh wait,
stuff.
I think I saw it
Yeah.
like on some streaming platform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's on Netflix or something. But that's like my random fact, totally unrelated to my
Wait,
hometown.
that's actually so funny.
And then the third thing that I think it's good for is actually this one's a weird one, but a good one: driving. So I think everything's kind of laddered up to space, but the driving, I like driving a lot.
Yeah.
And driving in New York, I drove here. New York City sucks.
You literally drove here to
I
the
know,
podcast.
and I did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
I did it-
shocked. I was like, we're literally Alphabet City. You can take the L. Why did you drive?
That's just a luxury at this point, but like I did it to myself. But
You're just a masochist.
Yeah, and it's it's more so because I like driving from when I was a kid because I drove everywhere.
Oh,
In
okay.
Westchester, you can't take public transportation really. You can, but it's like kind of a drag. And so it's really easy. It's much easier to drive around. So
Right.
it's like a 20-minute drive if you took the bus would take like an hour.
Oh yeah, it would take forever.
Be a headache. So, but I think that kind of peace and quiet and just like that space to yourself, I really do miss that. You
That's
don't.
so all American. It's like I miss driving.
Yeah, exactly. See, I got like totally brainwashed by
Yeah,
Westchester
Westchester
upbringing. Yeah, exactly.
Wait, I'm a terrible driver, so I unfortunately cannot relate to that. I failed my driving test 4 times, which is
my gosh.
some lore. Don't trust me in the driver's seat. Okay, so next question. Jay, what's your spiciest take about stablecoins?
I think people are mispricing this kind of momentum right now. I think like with everything they're overhyped, but maybe because I'm always jaded. I don't know. I think it's good to be jaded though in the space, just
Put
to
the
like
J in jaded.
yeah, to temper your expectations. Yeah.
Okay, no, I think that's true. I think it's good. It's good to have like a little bit of sobriety. I think when
Yeah.
we talk about hype in the crypto
But again,
space,
I think just the asterisk is like I'm super bullish on this
yeah,
space.
yeah. Okay, so what is your most deep cut restaurant or bite to eat in New York City that wouldn't make like a top 10 list?
I think it's Meadowsweet in Williamsburg.
Wait, why does that sound so familiar?
It was like much more on the lists like 10 years ago, and
Okay.
you might have even been. It's
Yeah.
decently popular, but it's just like not in like the kind of TikTok, Instagram scene as
Yeah,
much.
right.
Not to say that's not good or anything, but
yeah.
because it used to have a Michelin star for a while, I think, but it's not. I always call it like the most low key, and I say that in like the most endearing, best way.
Right.
Really love it.
Right.
I go there all the time, and the reason why I like it is because the food quality is amazing, and it's like a lot of the farm to table values to some degree,
Ooh.
and then there's always a seat.
Okay,
So
that's the kicker.
Yeah, that's the kicker. Now, because we're talking about food, I gotta shout out Theodora if you've been there.
My friend literally just put me on Theodora. I haven't been.
So-
What would you recommend?
So a little bias, Vitor,
Yeah.
he's a chef de cuisine there. He's a good friend of mine.
What?
He's amazing,
Wow.
amazing,
Do you get
super
special
talented.
special treatment?
Sometimes now, but I've been trying to be a little low key about the reservation.
Right.
Plus, I have a Resbot, so I use the Resbot.
What? How do I get on
I'll
that?
tell you the Resbot offline. I don't want to like leak it.
Oh hell yeah! That's real alpha.
Yeah,
That's
but
real
Theodore's
alpha.
amazing. One of the best restaurants in New York City right now. Tomer is the owner, one of the owners, and Vitor is the chef de cuisine. It's an incredible place.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you, Jay, for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, this was so much fun. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.